again. And he was a man like that. And as he got up that morning, every Israelite comes and says, accuses him. And what does he do? What will we do if people come and accuse him? Accuse us for something that we are not to be faulted with. How do we look at it? And it's amazing how Moses reacted. The Lord was trying to show the people who was in charge. Obviously that show of power wasn't enough, because the very next day the people wakes up to tell Moses and Aaron that they are murderers of God's people. It's a hard thing, people of God, to hear that when you are called a murderer of God's people. By this time God had had enough, and a cloud began to appear of the tabernacle. And God in his fury spoke to Moses and said, get away from these people. I have had enough. I am going to consume them all. This is the time I said, Lord, if I was in that position, what would have been my prayer? In all sincerity, I would have said, Lord, consume them. Let them learn the hard way. That's my nature, my fallen nature. But what did Moses say? Moses, sensing that the people were fixing to be struck dead by the Lord, sent Aaron out with specific instructions. He basically said, Aaron, you are the high priest. You're going to have to intercede for these people. Something is going to have to be done in order to satisfy the Lord. Moses gave Aaron specific instructions, and then he told him one thing. He said, go quickly. He didn't just say, go and intercede. He said, go quickly. He told Aaron to take a censer, the vessel upon which the incense was burned in the sanctuary, and which was appointed to be set every morning on the altar of incense, when the priest went to trim the lambs, and again when he lighted them in the evening. That was the place that Moses asked Aaron to go. Yearly on the Day of Atonement, the high priest entered the Holy of Holies, bearing the censer, and trim upon the burning coals of incense, holding the censer in his hand, while the incense burned, which is from Leviticus 16, 12 and 13. The priest would take burning coal from the altar and put it in a censer, or we can call it a fire pan, and basically a vessel containing fire. An instrument that was full of fire, was burning fire. That's what Moses was telling Aaron to get. An instrument that was full of fire. Beloved, there are two things that you've got to have to make intercession. We cannot make intercession without these two things. And the two things that we need to have to do intercession is a vessel and the fire. Without the vessel and the fire, you cannot intercede. So then you will ask, where do I get my vessel? Just tap yourself and say, I am the vessel. We each one is the vessel. We are all the vessels of God, but we need to get the fire. The scripture says that the fire came from the altar. The fire came from the altar. Aaron had to go to the altar to get the fire. Aaron had the knowledge of where to go when you need the fire. It is important, people of God, that we understand that it is to the altar we need to go to get the fire. The altar of sacrifice. That is the place where we can get the fire. It's the brazen altar where sacrifice was done, that where the fire was present. So you will ask me, what is the altar that we get? Where is the altar that I get fire into my vessel? Is it the altar that we come every Sunday and stand? Yes, that is one of the altars. But every altar, be it our family prayer, be it your personal altar with God, every altar that you make with the Lord, that's the place you get the fire. Because we see from the life of Abraham, Abraham was a man who was known to make altars right through his life. And because he made altars in every given situation, God made sure that the promise given to him came through. So our altar is some place that we go to and we make a sacrifice. A sacrifice of something that you and I need to pour out before the Lord. It could be different to each of us, which sacrifice the Lord is asking. But it is an altar of sacrifice. We cannot be an intercessor without an experience at the altar. We cannot be an intercessor. When I was meditating upon this, I was saying, Lord, I am not called to be an intercessor. There are the precious ladies in our church who are mighty intercessors. And I'm my calling is this, or my calling is that. But beloved, the Lord, what the Spirit of God put to me is, He said, what are you? Aaron was a priest. He was from the priesthood. Every one of us here today is a royal priesthood. We are all a priest. And who is our high priest? Our high priest is Jesus Christ. So if Jesus Christ is high priest, and if every day we are saying, I want to be like Jesus, which means I have to do everything that Jesus is doing. Jesus is ever interceding for you and for me before the Father. That means He is an intercessor. That means you and I need to be an intercessor. It's not for the mighty women of God who burn the candle and who pray, bless them mightily, but we all need to be an intercessor. And an intercessor, I will come to it presently as we go, has two functions, I see it as. Not just one function which I understood earlier. We cannot be an intercessor, as I said, without the experience at the altar. It doesn't work because it's at the altar that we get what we need. Otherwise, it is like telling a housewife, you go and cook a meal without a kitchen. Can you do that? You can't do that. It is like telling a teacher, you go and write on the blackboard without chalk. You can't write on a blackboard without chalk. So we cannot become an intercessor unless we come to an altar. It is very, very important. Otherwise it will be like a jockey without a horse, or a pilot without a plane, or a plumber without a wrench, a mechanic with no tool. I can go on and on. Because that is integral part is the altar. Without that we cannot move forward. Without a trip to the altar, beloved, there is no fire. There is no fire without a trip to the altar. The place where Aaron had to go to get the fire was called the brazen altar. It was the place where animals were sacrificed and burned as offerings unto the Lord. So a real intercessor will sacrifice him for others. He will pray when no one else will. He will worship, dance and sacrifice, go out of the way to get that fire. That's what an intercessor does. That's what an intercessor does. He will do that all, sometimes not even seen. But the last but most important thing that Aaron had to do was not to forget the incense. I spoke about the vessel, I spoke about the altar, and the third thing is the incense. The incense in the service of the tabernacle was called incense of aromas. The type presented by incense is prayer. Without incense, there will be only smoke. We can have the vessel, I can come to the altar. But if I don't pray and add my incense into that, there will be only smoke. But when I pray and add my incense into that, it becomes a sweet aroma unto the Lord. 2 Corinthians 2:15 says, for we are unto God a sweet savor of Christ, in them that are saved and in them that perish. You and I can be a sweet savor to God. When we add our prayer voice, when we pour out our prayer supplication into that fire, it becomes a sweet aroma before God. We all know that we all have sinned. The Bible tells us that we all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. There is none righteous. We all know that. Our righteousness is as filthy rags. We are too often being rebellious at times. We too have been prideful. We too have been made mistakes that frustrated grace in our life. All of us would have deserved to die. Some of us may have not even deserved any mercy whatsoever. But thank God, there was an intercessor. Jesus Christ, the high priest. Jesus Christ, the high priest. He is the greatest intercessor. Beloved, we are the vessels of God, and we know where we should go to get the fire. We need to go to the altar of God and fill our vessels with God's fire. This we need to do every day, beloved. This we need to do every day. Every day we need to go to that altar and fill our censer with that holy fire of God. And through the day, when we add that our prayer voice into the day, there is a sweet aroma that lifts up to the Lord. The fire of God comes upon the altar of sacrifice. We need to be that living sacrifice. That's why we are called to be the living sacrifice. We We don't die when we make that sacrifice. We live again. We live again. We live again. And we go forward. We go forward with the Lord. Once we get the fire into our vessel, we must not forget the incense, which is our prayer. Many of us have received many words. Many of us have received many prophecies. Many of us have received many a word of encouragement by a visiting pastor or from Brother Lalit or whatever. And sometimes we wonder, Lord, when is this coming to pass? But sometimes it is because we have not added prayer into it that the delay is. Nothing else. That's what the Lord was showing me. I have been asking the Lord for a couple of years now on some areas, and the Lord has not been silent, but nothing has happened. How the Lord has dealt in the past has been completely different in this new experience that I'm having. Because God, when He creates a breakthrough, in that breakthrough He just carries you through until whatever the next season comes. But in this case, it was not so. So my expectation has been that as in the past, as the Lord has done in the past, I was expecting now the Lord would do like this. Lord will do like this. And when it doesn't happen, your soul gets heavy and you get burdened. But every time that happened, there has been a word. Either when I was reading the word, or when Brother Lalit spoke, or somebody has seen a dream, that person will give a word. And that word lifts that spirit once again. And then the Lord reminded me something which I knew, but I realized that I have not consciously got into and done. He reminded me about the life of Elijah. Elijah went and told Ahab, the rain is coming, get to the castle fast, because the rain is going to overtake you. He went up to the mountain and he started praying. You see in the Bible it says, Elijah had his head between his knees and he was praying. And he told his servant Gehazi, look at the sea, look at the sea, look at the sea. 7 times he said. And on the 7th time he said, I see a cloud as small as a fist of a man. So the Lord was saying, my son, you have got a word. My son, you have a promise. And that will never cease. But you need to birth in prayer. That's what Elijah was saying. So this is the second kind of intercession that the Lord was revealing to me. I was earlier thinking intercession is only interceding on behalf of somebody else. Yes, that is one side of it. But when God gives me something, I need to go before the Lord and make sure that the word that is being given is birthed and brought to pass. So I need to even intercede for the word and the promise the Lord has given us. To each of us, there is a promise. For each of us, the promise is, I have come to give you life abundantly. For each of us, the promise is, I have come to bless you, pressed down, shaken together to overflow. But sometimes we are waiting for it. But today, be encouraged. Get into that posture before the Lord, because the Lord is going to bring a mighty breakthrough. I believe we are in the threshold of something is going to be like a dam bursting. Like a dam bursting. It is the goodness of God that is going to overflow and just surpass us as we move forward with the Lord. It is not going to be a little downpour. It is not going to be a little something. It is going to be something that you and I have not even dreamt of. We have asked the Lord, but we have not ever experienced. Beloved, today our Israel desperately needs an intercessor. And you will wonder, who is my Israel? The word of God says, if anyone believes in me, I will save him and his household. Will save him and his household. Our Israel is our household. We are called to be a Moses to our household. We are called to be the person who will lead them from Egypt, from the world, to the promised land. That's our calling. That's our primary calling. But who is our household? It is only our family? Is it only our relations? No, it is not. Yes, the family is important. Yes, our relations is part of it. But today, we have a greater understanding. Who is our household? What is that understanding you have today? Who is your household? Is your oikos. When you say oikos, sometimes we think, oh, it's a nice word. but every person whom I regularly come in contact with is my oikos. Every person whom I regularly meet and have a relationship will have only me to be a Moses for them. Nobody else will. When this hit me, I realized I need to speed up. Because